Daddy.
Yes. It's very cute. Hi. Folding laundry. And it got me thinking about a cinema term, a term in cinema called shoe leather. Called shoe leather. Shoe leather is when a movie spends a lot of time, really it's unnecessary time, highlighting something that has really nothing to do with the story, and it's kind of mundane. Now, some directors will try to lean into that. They're doing some sort of nouveau, artsy, whatever, and they'll lean way too much into that kind of thing. I've seen writers do it as well. It's like they want to really set the scene, and they spend a lot of time talking about something simple and mundane, but sometimes they can spend too much time talking about it. So I knew a gentleman once who loved the Roman legionnaires. He loved it. And he would write stories about the Roman legionnaires, but he would spend as much or more time just talking about lifestyle than the story that he was trying to tell. And it would completely alienate his readers because they were like, I wanted to see what the legionnaires were going to do, not just spend all their time talking about how they tied their armor on using leather thongs and just daily life. All of that's important for the color involved in that lifestyle, but not all of it. So when we write stories, it's important to take moments to talk about, is this person poor or rich? Or are they just middle class? Do they have trouble getting by? What are the pieces of their lives that really set it in a certain era or in a certain stage, such as Depression era? It would be important. Yes, my child is putting himself in a closet. I do not have automatic closing closet doors. Your story does need to have some of these mundane elements depending on what you're trying to tell. Depression era story about someone who comes from nowhere, you're going to create a comparison to show where they're going to get to. Maybe it's a rise and fall financially, and they come from nothing and they end as quote unquote something. I say something because just because you're rich doesn't make you somebody. Okay. But having that kind of comparison in your story is helpful and important, because one of the best things any story can do is create a dichotomy of the before and the after. If you're not creating a before and after, and either your main character doesn't change or the situation around the main character doesn't change, why is anyone reading your story? Well, let me tell you a story about how I got up in the morning, went through my day, and nothing changed at all. Even if that's where you wanted to start a story, to say that, hey, this person's life is not changing and it's boring, or it's maybe even numbing, like heart numbing and mind numbing because of the monotony of it, that should precede telling a story about how all of that changed. What was injected in my life by circumstance or by other people that suddenly brought that monotony to an end. Having a comparison between the before and the after is the journey. As you're telling that story and telling that, you need to create those details that make it tactile. When you talk about how cold the kitchen counter is in the morning, to illustrate we don't have heat in the house, or maybe it's made of stone, a very particular type of stone that stays cool throughout the day until the sun warms it. Use those, especially because anyone can picture, just about anybody, especially in the modern era, I can picture what like a Lycra countertop is, or I'm forgetting the term, but there's a term for the type of fake tile people put in cheap kitchens that looks like tile, but it's really just like a piece of plastic. I've lived in trailers, so I can't think of the name of it, but if you were to describe the cold and stickiness, especially on a slightly moist morning, that takes me right there. So describing mundane things is valuable. But try to pick the mundane things that lend to the story you're telling. Try to pick those moments that it's not just rando things. Not to say it always has to have like a plot device or there's an emotional attachment to me with that broken light switch that we never fixed when I was 7 and I accidentally hit it with a hammer and it split in two. It still worked, but my parents were too cheap to fix it. That's not a real story for me. But that type of thing, most of us have something like that in our lives. So throwing those things in is valuable. Don't fill up your story with them. The story has to be about motion, or specifically about the lack of motion. But at some point that motion needs to come. If your entire book, again, is literally about your life going nowhere, unless there's a lesson that you've learned in that, a progression, a journey, at least the kind of reader I am, because I can't speak for every kind of reader, and neither should you. You're writing for, first, always write for yourself. Your editing, second, is you're editing for everybody else. So tell the story that's important to you, but when it comes time to editing, this is where you start cutting out all that shoe leather and all those little darlings and go, what am I really trying to convey? And when I say story, it can be an epic space opera. It can be a really close to home relationship healing journey of a guy who comes home from college to fix things with his ex or with his family or with himself. Whatever those are, remember, don't overload the mundane details. Don't omit them, but be selective. Just enough to get your reader into that moment, into that environment, something that whether you're rich or poor, black or white, male or female, if you can create some real strong tactile elements, lean into that. Or if you are writing a story, maybe more for a black audience or a female audience, yeah, pick based on race and gender because you're trying to convey a very particular experience. But only do enough to create the flavor. Don't sit there and just drown your story in it. Or maybe you do that on draft 1 because you're just letting that stream of consciousness come. Cool, go right ahead. But that's what editing is for. I say often, write for yourself, edit for everybody else. Write for you. Write for what you feel the story needs to be in the moment. Then when you're done, come back to edit and really think about how are people going to interpret what I'm trying to convey. Because if you spend all your time trying to convey how important it was that your pillowcase had, some favorite cartoon or story character from your youth, and you spend pages and pages and pages. There's a reason I put down the Scarlet Letter in page 3, because he hadn't finished describing the door he had started describing in page 1. I don't care if it's a literary classic. I have no interest in reading a book that spends that amount of time describing a door. I know it's important to the story because it talks about, it's setting the stage for what that A really means. But he still spent too much time on it. So as you work on creating illustrations and work on conveying a level of real life.
Daddy Dink.
Okay. Keep your real world examples only to what they need to be. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later.